Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are going to be breaking down Underdog college football best ball drafts. That's right, best ball. College football has finally come to Underdog Fantasy, which is a big moment for pretty much everybody who, does content or plays daily fantasy or plays season-long fantasy for college football, because this is really kind of bringing college fantasy football to the mainstream. So here on this episode, we are going to kind of break down the ins and the outs of the Underdog college football best ball format. We're going to go over some strategies and some tips that you need to know in order to draft the most effectively. And then we are going to do a live draft here on the show. Now, if you do want more from me on this subject, I'm currently working on my rankings. They're going to be available on my Patreon, patreon.com/MikesMoneyPicks. If you are new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe now if you like this video, because pretty much we're going to be covering every single college football slate of the year from a daily fantasy perspective on DraftKings as well as FanDuel. So if you like this episode, stick around, play DFS for college football as the season goes on. All right, let's go ahead and end the introduction there, and let's go ahead and dive into the ins and outs of Underdog college football best ball. All right, so if you are uninitiated with best ball, basically what happens in best ball is it's a draft it and forget it type of setup. The drafts on Underdog for college football are 20 rounds, so you're going to draft 20 players, all skill position offensive players, no defenses, no kickers, no individual defensive players, none of that. And basically, at the end of every week, you do not have to sit anybody. You do not have to go to waivers. You do not have to make trades, go to free agency, none of that. At the end of every week, when the scores are tallied up, you are automatically going to get to start one quarterback, two running backs, two receivers, one tight end, one flex, and one super flex. And it picks that for you. And then as the season goes on, it totals up your points against the rest of your draft. And the way that Best Bowl Mania works on Underdog, which is their big college football best ball contest, this is tallied up through the first 11 weeks of the regular season. And then the top 2 out of the 12 in the draft room will move on to the playoffs, with a playoff being in week 12 and then week 13. And then there being the finals in week 14, which is where all the money is won. Now, if you've played college football DFS before, or if you have played NFL best ball before, both of these two should be pretty familiar to you, right? One thing that I found super interesting as, Underdog kind of unveils these contests and you see people creating content for it, is you have a lot of the kind of like old school, college fantasy football people's way of thinking of it. And then you have like the NFL best ball bros way of thinking of it. Well, like me personally, I'm a guy that plays a ton of college football DFS, create a lot of content for college football DFS. I've also got a lot of NFL best ball content as well. Check that out if you have not already, if it interests you. And so I'm kind of like marrying those two together in a way that I can kind of explain this format in a way that's going to make sense to beginners, but also kind of give you the ins and outs of each methodology and kind of the best way that you need to construct your team. But basically, you get 20 rounds and you're going to be starting 8 players every single week. If you are familiar playing college football DFS, it's the same lineup that you end up playing in DFS with the 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 1 flex and 1 super flex. The tight end position isn't generally used in DFS, but it is here in best ball. Now, with that super flex being a thing, that basically gives you the option to start 2 quarterbacks every week. And ideally, this ends with you starting 2 quarterbacks every week. More often than not, you are going to want a quarterback in that super flex spot. Now, what's really interesting about how college football best ball differs from NFL best ball is that every team in college football has at least 2 buys in the season. So you're really going to want to use some kind of scheduling matrix, or, just have the schedules pulled up while you're drafting. So that way you can kind of, have the best grasp of who has what bye weeks when. And we're going to talk about here in a second. Some teams have bye weeks during the playoff rounds, which is going to have a big impact on where and how you want to draft those players if they have a bye during week 12 or week 13. Now, from what I have gleaned from what Underdog has put out there, what everybody is saying on Twitter, week 0 and week 1 overlap. If you're not familiar with college football, week 0, there's a few teams that play games kind of the week before the season starts. And some of them also have games in week 1. So like, what's going to end up happening is, instead of getting a bye for week 0, or instead of not getting anything for week 0, basically if a team plays in week 0 and week 1, then their higher score is going to count. If they just play in week 0, then their week 0 score will count for week 1. And then most teams that play in week 1, just week 1 only, then obviously their week 1 score is going to count. But interestingly enough, if a team plays in both week 0 and week 1, then they're going to have an additional bye week throughout the season. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on as well. Georgia Tech is the main team that I believe is affected by that. Now, if you have played an NFL best ball, I'm going to try to keep this part short, but stacking in bye weeks are super important in NFL best ball. Basically, stacking is when you pair a quarterback with their receiving options, right? In college football best ball drafts, I do think the stacking is an important concept, but I do think that there are some quarterbacks that do not need to be stacked because a lot of the most effective fantasy quarterbacks in college football are guys who score fantasy points with their legs as opposed to their arms. So you don't necessarily have to go out of your way to stack every single quarterback on these underdog college football best ball drafts. Now, if you get 20 rounds and you end up starting 8 of those positions that we just talked about, how you allot your positions when you draft, there is a ton of options for it, right? So with there being 20 rounds, what I have found in general is that I want to draft between 4 and 5 quarterbacks, between 5 and 6 running backs, between 6 and 8 wide receivers, and then 2 to 4 tight ends. But basically the caveat that I'm giving this is with those ranges kind of varying and it not being like super set in stone, I want to be thinking about as I'm drafting which position I need more help in or which position I need less help in. For instance, if I draft a quarterback early that I know is going to have a bye in week 12 with the first week of the playoffs, well, then I know I need to cover my tail and get an additional quarterback so that way I have an option in week 12 for that quarterback's bye. The same concept goes for a tight end. If I'm drafting, one tight end that has a bye in week 12, then I need to cover my tail and make sure I get some additional tight ends. Also, with the quarterbacks and tight ends being, kind of one-off positions, if I draft a quarterback or 2 quarterbacks super early, I might go with, lesser quarterbacks late and only get 4. Or if I'm not able to load up on quarterback early, then I might want to get a lot more quarterbacks late and end up with 5 quarterbacks. Similar concept with tight end. If I'm not drafting a tight end early, then I want to get multiple tight ends late and try to get multiple bites at the apple and multiple options. So that way, even if one of them is on a bye, I'm still able to get a good score. Now, as we mentioned, and this will be the time where if you're watching on YouTube, this will be the time to take a screenshot. If you are listening on audio, this will be a time to kind of get the notes app out and like write this down maybe. But there's a lot of teams that are going to be on a bye in week 12, which is the first week of the underdog playoffs, right? And so the teams that are on a bye in week 12, going by conference, Duke, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Miami, NC State, Virginia Tech, the Big Ten, Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, Michigan, Washington. In the Big 12, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech, UCF. In the SEC, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and Vanderbilt. Now, interestingly enough, there is one team that has a week 13 bye, which is the semifinals on Underdog's Best Bowl Mania, and that is Oregon. So basically, here's what happens with this is you got to have faith that you're going to make it to week 12, first off, and that your team is going to be good enough to make it out of your draft. But when you get to week 12, you're going to have to win another lobby, pretty much another round of 12 if you want to make it to week 13. And so drafting players off of those teams that we just mentioned that have a bye in week 12 is going to significantly hamstring your ability to do that. And so you need to keep in mind, if you are drafting players from these teams, you need to get players who are not on those teams so that way you can have options to fill out your lineup and hopefully still get past week 12. Interestingly enough, though, with all those teams having a bye in week 12, it means that they only have one bye throughout the regular season. So it's highly likely that a lot of players on a lot of those teams are, helpful pieces in a winning lineup that gets you out of your initial draft room and into the playoffs, but then are not able to help you in week 12, with the most interesting caveat being Oregon having the week 13 bye, and you cannot use those players in the semifinal round. So what I would recommend doing with this, like we talked about, is have a scheduling matrix up and know that if I draft a guy that has a week 12 bye, then I need to cover my tail with a guy at his position who has a good matchup in week 12 and certainly is not one that has another week 12 bye. Now, another thing, if you are familiar with NFL best ball content and how the NFL best ball season ends in week 17, well, the college football best ball season is ending in week 14. It's Thanksgiving weekend. It's quote unquote rivalry week, right? And pretty much everybody is in action. There's nobody in the Power Four with a week 14 bye. I should have mentioned this earlier. All of these drafts are Power Four only, plus Notre Dame and plus the two old Pac-12 teams, Oregon State and Washington State. So there's no group of 5 players in these drafts. I should have mentioned that from the get-go. But anyway, so basically with, in the NFL, when week 17 has the finals, everything comes down to week 17, right? So a lot of guys, a lot of content creators advise stacking games in week 17. So that way, if one game scores a ton of points, well, then you have a ton of points from that one game and you're able to, skyrocket up the leaderboards, right? So college football is going to have that concept for week 14. So another thing we want to talk about is some options for week 14 game stacks. And, these are just some that, as you're going through, I don't necessarily think you have to try to, get one stack or the other, but hey, like if I'm drafting and I have a couple players from Oklahoma State already, well, then I might want to get a few players from Colorado to kind of back end that and give myself my week 14 game stack, right? So here are some of the best week 14 game stacks that I have found when looking at the schedule. Oklahoma State versus Colorado, Ole Miss versus Mississippi State, Georgia versus Georgia Tech, UCF versus Utah, USC versus Notre Dame, Florida State versus Florida, Kentucky versus Louisville, LSU versus Oklahoma, Oregon versus Washington, North Carolina versus NC State, Baylor versus Kansas, Texas Tech versus West Virginia, and Ohio State versus Michigan, aka the game. Texas A&M is another one that I considered putting on the list, but did not. I don't expect the A&M offense to score a lot of points in that one, me being a biased Texas fan, hook 'em. So anyway, that's just a list of week 14 game stacks that you could do. What I would highly recommend doing, though, like I said, as we've talked about the whole draft, is have a scheduling matrix out while you're drafting so that way you can know who and, who plays who in the playoff weeks and, who has the week 12 buys and whatnot. Now, before I dive into a live draft, I did want to shout out a few people who are doing good work and making good content for college fantasy football and college football best ball. So first off, there's a podcast called CFF All Access that is run by Fantasy Points. They do a lot of good stuff with this. They've done a lot of live drafts. They have a lot of good content. They're very informed. And they are Eric Froton at CFF Froton on Twitter, Josh Chevalier at CFF Guys on Twitter, Mike Bainbridge at MBainbridge CFF on Twitter. Those 3 guys, they do a lot of good work. They're very knowledgeable. And if you're looking for another podcast or live drafts to watch, those would be the first guys I would start with. On Twitter, there's a guy named Volume Pigs who has a ton of articles about just some different players and some different kind of ways of looking at college fantasy football at Volume Pigs on Twitter. And then at CFF DFS is a Twitter account that I have corresponded with a lot. He's a great dude. He has a ton of Twitter threads and a lot of different kind of analysis on college football best ball. He's done a lot of math and he's really knowledgeable on DFS, really knowledgeable on college football. I would recommend giving him a follow. And then also, if you're looking to get in private best ball leagues, ones that are not on Underdog, the guy to follow would be Carp at CarpG926 on Twitter. Earlier in the summer, me and Josh Chevalier at CFF Guys, we did a big long episode where we talked about these best ball leagues where, they are not they're not Power 4 only, and they're 30 rounds and they are private, not tournaments. So we talked about all kinds of strategies, all kinds of targets for those in that video. So if you're looking to get in some private best ball leagues, go check out the video that me and Josh made and go reach out to Carp on Twitter because, if you're doing the big tournaments on Underdog, then the private best ball leagues is a great way to expand on it. And really expand on your own knowledge because those are going to use G5 players as well as the Power 4 players. All right, so with all that being covered, we talked about all the strategies, we talked about all the ins and outs. We haven't talked about any players yet because we're going to do that during our live draft. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick breather. I'm going to go ahead and queue up a live draft, and then we are going to get to the live draft portion. All right, so we have joined the live draft, and we have gotten pick 7. So I actually have not drafted from this spot yet. This is, I believe, my 4th one of these I've done on Underdog. I have not had the number 1 overall pick yet. I have not drafted at the very tail end of the round yet either. So pick 7, interesting spot to pick from. We're going to see how it goes. And the draft is about to get started here. And remember, this is Best Bowl Mania that I'm drafting. This is Underdog's flagship college fantasy or college football best ball draft. It's $10 to enter. I find them very enjoyable. If you're looking to get started on Underdog, maybe you don't have an Underdog account yet, check the link in the description. Use my promo code MConnolly88. It's from my personal account. Use that to get your first deposit matched. It's basically free money. So if you're sitting there saying, hey, I want to do 5 of these drafts, I'm going to deposit $50. Well, use my promo code, and now you can do 10 drafts as opposed to 5. And Best Bowl Mania is getting close to filling, but I really hope Underdog goes forward and makes more contests for this, because this has been something that has gotten a lot of participation, and it's been a really good thing so far for the college football space. So I'm really hoping that Best Bowl Mania is not the end of Underdog's college football best ball contests. Now, interestingly enough, it appears the guy at pick 1 has timed out. He got Ollie Gordon, number 1. So let's go ahead and talk about that real quick. If I did have the number 1 overall pick, I would be taking Ollie Gordon instantly. He's a guy that sees a ton of carries. He's very good at football. Like, when you think about what makes running backs great in fantasy, it's volume in addition to, actually being able to make guys miss. And Ollie Gordon checks all those boxes, and he has a very light schedule playing in the Big 12. So I just think he's a great target. He is the number 1 overall pick, in my opinion. Dillon Gabriel went 2 here in this draft. I don't necessarily agree with that. I have not taken Dillon Gabriel at all yet. I think he's a great fit for Oregon's offense and what Will Stein wants to do, but I really struggle to draft a guy knowing that I'm not going to be able to use him in the semifinal round. And really, I think there's a non-zero chance that Dillon Gabriel gets benched by the time the season is over. They do have Dante Moore, the transfer from UCLA, over there now. And really, with Oregon moving to the Big Ten, that schedule got a lot more defensive, a lot tougher than their old Pac-12 schedules. So I just think there's a lot going against Dillon Gabriel. It's not to say that I would never draft him, but he's going with pick 2 in most drafts, and I think that's quite simply too high. I would rather have Tetaroa McMillan. I would rather have Luther Burden. So as we're watching this draft, we've seen a run on quarterbacks. And with it being a super flex format, that is not super shocking, in all honesty, because pretty much you do not want to get really behind at quarterback. But right here, I will take what falls to me. I have pick 7. After Dillon Gabriel went 2, Garrett Green of West Virginia went 3, Jalen Miller of Alabama went 4. I do believe those are 2 of the best quarterback options. I have not drafted them that high in a draft, though. Personally, I would rather had the 2 receivers that went next. So pick 5 was Tetaroa McMillan of Arizona. Pick 6 was Luther Burden of Missouri. I took Omarion Hampton of North Carolina, number 7. Now, after that, really, I think when looking at these drafts right now, I think there's a big 4 skill players of Ollie Gordon, Tetaroa McMillan, Luther Burden, and Omarion Hampton. And if you cannot get one of those if you cannot get one of those 4, I think that it is great to look at a quarterback in round 1, personally. I think that those 4 are in a class above everybody else. And you're kind of seeing that pattern hold true here in this one, because after I took Omarion Hampton, number 7, Jax Dart went number 8, Avery Johnson went number 9, and then Evan Stewart, Oregon receiver, went number 10, with Nico Iamaleava, Tennessee quarterback, going number 11. Now, interestingly enough, one other thing that's kind of a knock on Dillon Gabriel is that both of Oregon's top 2 receivers, Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart, go before you can get them in round 2. So, like, if you take Dillon Gabriel in round 1, you are not going to be able to get either of those wide receivers to stack with him, which to me just lessens the amount that I want him, right? So now we are looking at, it's almost back down to us in round 2. The end of round 1, Jackson Dart, Avery Johnson, Evan Stewart, Nico Iamaleava. We've already gone over those. The guy at the turn at the end of round 1 took DJ Giddens and Devin Neal, 2 running backs. I like both of those guys as players, but one thing you're going to hear me start to do as we get through this round is there's a ton of running back value late. And so I really don't necessarily feel the need to get super ahead at running back. I feel really good that I have my guy Omarion Hampton as my number 1 running back, but really there's so many good running backs that you can get in later rounds that I'm not going to feel the need to try to get ahead here at the running back position. However, as it's coming to me, unfortunately, I kind of think that that's going to be what I'm going to end up doing. Jaden Ott of Cal is going to be my next pick. And so I'm probably going to be good on running back for a long, long time. Jaden out of Cal is a guy that's going to see a ton of carries. The ACC schedule that Cal is going to play is not super difficult. So I don't really think that, he's going to be in bad shape at all. And so that's a guy that I'm really confident drafting here in round 2. So one other thing that I wanted to talk about is one tool that I have been using from Spike Week. So let's see if I can get my screen shared here real quick. Yeah. So I'm going to link this in the description, but Spike Week has a college football playoff schedule cheat sheet where you can see who everybody is playing in week 12, 13, and 14 for the playoffs here in these underdog contests. And so, if we go look at our guy, Jaden at Cal, that's a great week 12, 13, and 14 schedule. Syracuse, Stanford, and SMU. SMU really being the only good defense that he is going to see in that stretch. So, honestly, too, when you look at it, there are a lot of guys, a lot of teams in these schedules that shape up really well. Really, the entire Big 12, their playoff schedules look pretty good because nobody in that conference plays any kind of defense anymore. Now that Texas and Oklahoma have left, so if you're looking to kind of set up some stacks in week 12, 13, and 14, or if you are looking to just see who your guys play in the playoffs here in these underdog leagues, Spike Week has that tool that I really personally like, and I'm going to be putting a link to that in the description. All right, so now after I picked Jaden Ott, we saw Tez Johnson of Oregon go at the 2-7, followed by Kyron Drones, Virginia Tech quarterback, Emeka Egbuka, Ohio State receiver, Thomas Castellanos, Boston College quarterback, and then Darius Taylor, Minnesota running back, Taj Brooks, Texas Tech running back, down there to the end of round 2. So what I'm looking at now is I would really like to get Jackson Arnold of Oklahoma here with my pick here in round 3. If I'm not able to get him, I would like to get one of the top receivers that's available. Kevin Concepcion of NC State is a guy that I love personally. Well, never mind. Because looking here at the top of round 3, Xavier Estrepo, Kevin Concepcion, and Aronde Gaston have been the first 3 picks of this round. Donovan Edwards going at 3-4. And so I am hoping and praying that I can get Jackson Arnold here at pick 31. That's not going to happen, though. He went pick 29. So now I'm going to pivot and hopefully get Jaywin Daniels of Kansas in pick 31. And with Quinshawn Judkins going pick 30, that's going to be exactly what I'm going to do. So Jaywin Daniels of Kansas. I like that pick a lot. Kansas has a supremely easy playoff schedule: BYU, Colorado, and Baylor. And also Jaywin Daniels is not a guy that I'm going to feel the need to stack because personally, he's a mobile quarterback. He's going to put up a ton of fantasy points via his legs. He doesn't feature one receiver a ton, so I'm not going to feel the need to go out of my way to take some Kansas wide receivers. But if some fall to me, or if that's just how it pans out, I'm not going to be opposed to that strategy. But he's just a quarterback that you don't have to necessarily stack. All right, so after I picked, we saw 2 running backs that I do, in fact, like, but did not feel the need to grab in round 3. Go Damien Martinez of Miami, LaQuint Allen of Syracuse. And then after that, Trey Harris, Brady Cook, Travis Hunter to the end of round 3. And then CJ Baxter and Haynes King at the start of round 4. Let's go ahead and talk about Haynes King real quick. So all things considered, Haynes King has a great fantasy profile, honestly. He runs a lot. Georgia Tech's got a not terrible schedule. But the problem is he's pretty much undraftable, in my opinion, because you are getting the week 0 game at Florida State where it's going to be tough for that to count. The extra bye week during the season, bye week in week 12, and then he plays Georgia in week 14. So you know that he's not going to count for your score in week 14 when he's playing Georgia. So just really, really tough to draft Haynes King, in my opinion. I would need to be taking him in the 5th or 6th round. And in every draft I've gone, he's gone near the start of the 4th. So, like I said, guy that his fantasy profile is great, but his schedule just creates a situation where he's really hard to take, in my opinion. Anyway, after Haynes King went pick 38, Carson Beck went 39, Garrett Nussmeier 40, RJ Harvey 41, and I took Cam Ward as my second quarterback with the 42nd pick. And Xavier Estrepo went earlier, so that's the primary stacking partner for Cam Ward at Miami. But what I can do is there are 2 Miami receivers that are going to go late. That is Jacoby George and Sam Brown. So I would not be opposed to scooping up a stack late. And Miami, in terms of the schedule, they do have the week 12 bye, but they have Wake Forest and Syracuse in week 13 and week 14. So hopefully I'm able to get enough quarterback production that the week 12 bye does not affect me a whole lot there with Cam Ward. All right, now I got to be honest, I'm feeling kind of good about quarterback for the moment. So what I'm really going to want to do here is get a receiver with my next pick because I do not have one. I currently have 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, and that's it. So as I'm going through with this draft, now that I've allotted a lot of my early draft capital to the quarterback and to the running back position, what I'm going to be looking at doing is simply loading up on more receivers later. Because if I'm not going to get the studs, if I'm not going to get the guys that I can count on week in and week out, well, then I'm going to make sure that I can get volume and I can get enough options that surely one of them ends up coming through with a big game when I need it. After I took Cam Ward, let's get caught back up here. Alec Aomanor of Stanford, Kyle Mononga of Rutgers, Gavin Sawchuk of Oklahoma, Jeremy Bernard of Alabama, Will Pauling of Wisconsin, and then Squirrel White of Tennessee ended the 4th round. Trey Wilson, a.k.a. Eugene Wilson of Florida, to start the 5th. Travion Henderson, Abu Sama, and Will Howard to kind of start the 5th round here. And it's getting back to me, and there are a lot of receivers available at the top of the board. I've got 2 picks before I can go. So let's see what this guy does here. He takes Noah Fifita of Arizona. So it is going to come to me, and I'm going to have the option of Presley, Bond, Lacey, or Burks as the top receivers that are available. And so let's see what this guy does. He does not have a quarterback yet. That is not something I would like to do. He has Brennan Presley, so I'm going to take Isaiah Bond. So basically, when you think about the Texas offense and the Steve Sarkisian offense, he really wants to play a ton of 11 personnel and play a ton of the same 3 wide receivers. They've come out and said that they're going to play a lot of wide receivers at the start of the season until they can figure out who those 3 are. I really think Isaiah Bond is going to be one of those 3. He was, electric at Alabama last year. He's one of the fastest players in all of college football. And really that Texas offense last year with Quinn Ewers, it supported 2 very viable fantasy wide receivers in Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell. And so if that pattern continues, I definitely think I got really good value there on Isaiah Bond, and he does not have the dreaded week 12 bye. So really, really good. Really happy to get Isaiah Bond there at pick 55 for me. Also, if you've played the video game CFB 25, EA Sports College Football 25, Isaiah Bond, one of the best players on that game because he's got 98 speed, which makes him just an electric option in that game. It makes Texas one of the best teams to use in that game. Anyway, after I took Isaiah Bond, Trevor Etienne, Kyron Lacey, Basil Tootin, Deion Burks, Quinn Ewers to end the 5th round with Riley Leonard starting the 6th. And then we'll see where this guy goes. I'm thinking right here, Miller Moss, the next selection. I'm thinking right here, Tyler Shuck after that. I'm thinking right here, I want to go another wide receiver, but I really like Grayson McCall of NC State as a quarterback option. I really do. He does have the dreaded week 12 bye though. So what that means is I do not want to reach to take another quarterback that has a week 12 bye when I already have one that has a week 12 bye. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Jaden Higgins of Iowa State here. So when you think about the Iowa State offense, they've got Higgins and they've got Noel. Both of them command a ton of targets, huge target share. He's going to give me some ceiling games because there's going to be some games where the option is Higgins as opposed to Noel. So I definitely like that. I got him as my 2nd receiver. So now I need to be kind of thinking, okay, where are my week 12 buys and how do I need to cover them up, right? Well, the only week 12 buy player that I have drafted so far is Cam Ward of Miami. And so I need to figure out how I can get another quarterback that is able to, kind of fill in that gap that I'm going to have in week 12. But like I said, the problem is I love Grayson McCall. Grayson McCall just went, so that's not going to be an issue anymore. But he has a week 12 bye, as does Cameron Rising of Utah. Does Connor Weigman have a Big 12 or week 12 bye? No, he does not. He's got New Mexico State in week 12, followed by Auburn and then Texas. So I'm thinking I'm actually going to want Connor Weigman, but with his ADP being 90, I'm going to try to push it a little bit. Unless there's somebody I really don't like at the top of the board. I'm going to try to push it a little bit on him. So let's see what we got. This is the range where there are a ton of running backs that I like coming up. I don't really feel the need to take any of these guys near the top of the board. So you know what? It might be reaching a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and draft Connor Weigman. I just think with the construction of the team that I've got, he's a very vital pick there at 79. Maybe could I have pushed it to him in the next round? Yeah, but I'm looking at a board where there's just a ton of options and guys that I like that I think I can, wait it out 4 more picks or a little more than 4 more picks. I think 7 more picks. Wait it out 7 more picks and get one of those skill guys as opposed to trying to push it and get one of the skill guys now and maybe not get Weigman down the road. Just with the construction of my team, it makes more sense to lock in Weigman. Anyway, I've gotten a little bit behind on the players. To end the 6th round, I took Higgins, then went Marks, Scatabo, Carroll, Kyle Williams, Colin Lacey, and Preston Stone to end the round. The 7th round started with Grayson McCall, Dylan Sampson, Cam Rising, LaJohntay Western, Nick Anderson, Nick Singleton. I took Connor Weigman, followed by Zachariah Branch, Chip Trainum, who was a guy I really wanted, Kobe Hudson, Malachi Fields, and Rashad Owens to end the 7th. And then to start the 8th, we've got Caden Fegan and TJ Harden going at the top of the round. And so now the guy I really want, never mind, he just got taken. I was going to take Justice Haynes, Alabama running back. He appears to be the leader in the clubhouse for that position right now. So next up, I'm going to pivot a little bit. The guy that I wanted just got taken as well. I was going to take Cam Cook, running back at TCU, but I can't even do that anymore. So let's see. It's going to come to me next pick. Will it come to me next pick? Okay. I'm going to queue up Denzel Boston of Washington. That is the guy that I'm going to take. It appears to be a little bit glitchy right now, though. So I'm going to put 2 more guys in my queue. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to get Denzel Boston of Washington. So at the top of the 8th round, we already mentioned that Fegan and Harden went. Justice Haynes and Cam Cook were the next 2 picks. Like I said, I wanted one of them. Jeremiah Hunter of Washington went next, followed by me taking Denzel Boston of Washington at the 90th pick. So basically, I believe Denzel Boston is going to end up being that number 1 Washington wide receiver. Washington has, they're playing the Big Ten schedule now, but it's a little softer from what a lot of other teams have. It's not the strongest Big Ten schedule. And we know that Washington offense can put up a lot of points, that they got transfer quarterback Will Rogers in there. So I definitely don't mind taking Denzel Boston there. Also, I feel a lot better about my top 2 running backs than I did my top 2 wide receivers. So it made it a lot easier to convince myself that I needed to take a 3rd wide receiver in Boston as opposed to a 3rd running back there. Once the running backs that I wanted ended up getting taken. So after I took Boston, Taylon Green of Arkansas, Jeremiah Smith of Ohio State, Colston Loveland of Michigan, Ches Malusi of Wisconsin, John Mateer of Washington State, and Justice Haynes of Georgia Tech ended the round. John Mateer is an interesting one going there at 95. He has not necessarily won that quarterback battle yet for Washington State, and he's being drafted like he has. That's something that significantly concerns me. It's not necessarily a situation that I want to sign up to take, especially in the 8th round. So this is a little interesting that he went there. If you're gambling that he wins that job, I don't mind it. But man, that's a tough pill to swallow. Okay, so what I have here is I'm going to take Caleb Jackson of LSU. So basically, the LSU offense that we saw last year was one of the best offenses in all of college football. Logan Diggs was a very productive fantasy player until he got injured because he was the guy that was on the field a ton. And it's not like he was that great at football, if I'm being honest. So Caleb Jackson, if he's the guy that's able to get the volume, I don't think he actually has to be all that good to get a lot of fantasy points, a lot of fantasy production. So Caleb Jackson, very confident 9th round pick there. The rest of the 9th round, it started with Luke Lachey of Iowa, followed by Josh Kelly of Texas Tech, Corey Kiner of Cincinnati, Eric Singleton of Georgia Tech, Jaden Blue of Texas, DJ Uiagalelei of Florida State. I took Caleb Jackson and then went a run of receivers. Antoine Wells Jr., Jalen Noel, Chris Bell, excuse me. And then Jarquez Hunter going at the 9-11 and Jordan Moore ending the round at the 9-12. The 10th round is almost back to me already with Dominic Lovett, Dylan Bell, Rocco Becht, and Rocket Sanders. I'm going to take Lenoris Sellers of South Carolina as my 4th quarterback. And that actually, I may end up stopping a quarterback after that. I like Sellers' potential. I think that when you play best ball, a lot of what you're doing is talking yourself into situations, right? Of how can this guy have a monster statistical season? And really for me, with that South Carolina offense, like, hey, what if Spencer Rattler really just wasn't all that good? Is an easy narrative for me to talk myself into after watching Spencer Rattler play. And so Lenoris Sellers going to be the starter in that South Carolina offense. He's a dual threat. I definitely think there's a pathway for him to put up a ton of fantasy points in that offense. After I took Sellers, then went Donovan Smith, Will Shepard, Jonte Cook, and Elijah Surratt. 2 more picks here in the 10th round. Caden Prescorn just went of Ole Miss. And here we are with the last pick of the 10th round. Cade Klubnik of Clemson was that last pick. And he followed up first pick of the 11th round by stacking him with tight end Jake Brenningstool. I actually really like that as a strategy that guy just did. Now, for me, I do not have a tight end yet. And looking at what's coming to me on the board, I'm not like super sold on any of these guys with the exception of getting Jacoby George as my Miami stack. So what I think I'm going to do is if Jacoby George falls to me, that's who I want. If not, I'm going to scoop up RJ Maryland of SMU. And then if I don't get RJ Maryland in this round, I'm going to come back and try to get Haas or Jolly in the 12th round as my tight end 1. The start of this round after Brenningstool was Jonah Coleman, running back of Washington. Jake Hoover, TCU quarterback. I like that one a lot in the 11th round. Jaquindon Jackson of Arkansas going at the 11-4. And now we're waiting and seeing what's going to happen the 2 picks right before me to see if I get Jacoby George or RJ Maryland. Parker Jenkins went at the 11-5, Houston running back. And it looks like the guy in front of me has timed out, and we're going to see what ends up happening there. My internet must be really slow today if it's waiting this long on timeouts before I can see who goes. Okay, he got Xavier Henderson, so I'm going to confidently take Jacoby George, getting my little mini Miami stack with Cam Ward and Jacoby George. And now I'm going to hope and pray that one of the 3 tight ends that I have queued up falls to me here at the 12th round. But I got to say, the reason why I mentioned time and time again how I don't feel the need to get ahead at running back is looking here near the end of the 11th round, look at all the quality running backs that are still left as opposed to the other positions where I feel like we're really kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel or really looking to talk ourselves into guys, right? But the running back position, you've got LJ Martin for BYU that even though I think BYU is going to be very bad this season, he's like the offense, right? Quali Conley of Arizona, if he ends up being the starter there, a ton of potential in that LSU offense. Roman Hemby of Maryland, super talented, just hasn't gotten the carries. Well, they've got a new quarterback this year that's not Talia Tagovailoa. They're going to have to run the football. Jordan Waters of NC State, heard a lot of good things about him at camp. Jeremiah Love of Notre Dame, I love that pick as well. So like pretty much there's just a ton of good running backs here in this range that I don't really feel the need to just rush into getting 3-4 running backs at the start of the draft because you have so many good options here looking at you in the 12th round. If all the best ball bros in NFL talk about the 0 running back strategy, and if you were to do that here in underdog college football, I think that's a very viable strategy just because of the options that are available this late in the draft. The only problem is that a lot of the guys I like in round 1 and round 2 are those running backs. All right, so gotten a little bit behind on narrating the picks there. At the top of the 12th round, or I'm sorry, at the end of the 11th round, after I picked Chris Brazell, John Meredith, Aiden Childs, RJ Maryland, and Elijah Badger, ending the 11th round. LJ Martin, Jeremiah Love, Theo Weiss, Quali Conley, Carnell Tate to start the 12th round. I took Luke Haas, Arkansas tight end. Jordan Waters of NC State went right after me. And so now I'm looking at a board where I've got 4 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 4 wide receivers, 1 tight end. I'm not really in a rush to get any one position. Luke Haas of Arkansas does not have the dreaded Week 12 bye. So I don't really feel the need to rush to get a second tight end anytime soon. If you watch the show that me and Josh did back in June on, general best ball, college football best ball, before Underdog did the contests, he was big on Luke Haas, and I am big on Luke Haas as well. I think he's a very quality tight end that we got there in the 12th round. Now, to end the 12th round, Mason Taylor, Jadarian Price, so both Notre Dame running backs going in the 12th round. Reuben Owens, DeQuan Finn, and Dorian Singer ending the 12th round, with Katron Allen, Roman Hemby, and Jam Miller starting the 13th. So what I'm looking at here is, let's go ahead and get me another receiver. So I really do like CJ Daniels of LSU and Kelly Akrayi of Mississippi State. I think I can try to come back around and get Nick Harbor if I want to. Boy, I'm going to be very tempted if Justin Jowie falls to me, though. Okay, Justin Jowie did not fall to me. So I'm going to take CJ Daniels, LSU. So if you're not familiar with CJ Daniels, he is a Liberty transfer coming over to LSU. We know what this LSU offense is capable of from what they did last year with Jaden Daniels at the helm. And I think CJ Daniels is going to wrap up one of those starting spots in that lineup. And if he is able to do so, he should be able to score a ton of fantasy points. Really, with the LSU guys, everybody thinks Kyron Lacey is going to be a starter because he was a starter last year. He just wasn't like the featured guy. And really, no one really knows what's going to happen with the rest of the guys like CJ Daniels and Xavier Thomas. But if you kind of place your bet on him, and to me, a 13th round pick in this best ball draft is not a large bet. If you place your bet that he's going to end up starting, and you're right, you're going to get a guy that's going to be super productive. And I thought CJ Daniels was just good last year at Liberty. So really liking that pick that I was able to get. So like we said, I would like to kind of get my stack going here for Lenore Sellers and take Nick Harbor. If you've played College Football 25, the video game, Nick Harbor is a literal cheat code on that game because he's 6'4" and has 99 speed. He's just an explosive playmaker. Dang, I really do like Kelly Akrayi, and if Kelly Akrayi falls to me, it's really going to determine whether or not I feel the need to invest in the stack or go with the guy that I just think is the better option, which is going to be an interesting conundrum. So let's see if that happens. Hasn't happened yet. Two more picks before it gets to me, and then I will go ahead. Okay, there went Akrayi. So yeah, it's going to be Nick Harbor, as long as the guy in front of me does not take Nick Harbor. If he does, then I might have to go outside the box. I'm going to go ahead and queue up Jordan Hudson as my backup plan if he takes Harbor, because okay, yep, Nick Harbor. All right, so I got a little bit behind on narrating here, but after I took CJ Daniels, went Noah Carter of Michigan State, Ashton Daniels of Stanford, very early to see him go. What is I like sports? No, that I don't. Jack Velling of Michigan State, Daniel Jackson of Minnesota, and Oscar Delp to end the 13th round, followed by Terrence Ferguson, Eric McAllister, CJ Donaldson, Kelly Akrayi, Blake Shapen, me taking Nick Harbor at the 162nd pick, Malik Benson going 163. All right, so at this point, I've got 6 wide receivers. Like I said, I think you can really make up ground by kind of just knowing where you've allocated your picks already, right? And so I think I did a really good job of, even though I didn't get a wide receiver until Isaiah Bond, getting a lot of different quality options that I can use as my wide receiver after that. Okay, so we're just going to put a few guys that I like in my queue. Not necessarily in any order, but just guys that I like. That one missed. So another interesting conundrum right now is I am sitting with 4 quarterbacks. Only one of them has the Week 12 bye. I may take a 5th one, and I don't because I know I have 3 quarterbacks already that don't have the Week 12 bye. I do feel like I can genuinely take a quarterback without really kind of stressing. Yeah. So anyway, got back to me in the 15th round, and I took Mitchell Evans, Notre Dame tight end. Coming off of an injury, but he was an elite target earner in that offense. He was basically their number one wide receiver until he got hurt. So I'm banking on the fact that he is going to be able to come back and play most of the season and going to be able to play at the same level of effectiveness that he was. I love the fact that I'm taking Evans as my tight end 2 as opposed to my tight end 1. So anyway, let's get back to the picks. So after I took Nick Harper, went Malik Benson, Tyler Warren, Daniel Jackson, Penny Boone, Kobe Prentice, and Devin Mockabee to end the 14th round. Jordan Hudson, Bryson Nesbitt, Ali Jennings, Keegan Jones, Drew Aller, and Brennan Sorsby. And then it came to me in the 15th round, and I took Mitchell Evans. Cam Coleman, Andrew Armstrong, Curtis Rourke, Jacoby Lane, and Barryon Brown ended the 15th round. I am really, really hoping that I can get Chris Tyree here with my next pick. Chris Tyree, Virginia receiver. This was another guy that me and Josh talked about on the June show, because he is coming into potentially that Malik Washington role, where Malik Washington earned target after target after target after target last year in this Virginia offense. And so I am hoping and praying that I can get Chris Tyree with this pick. I've got tight ends in my queue, but I'm not really looking to take a tight end right here because I did get Mitchell Evans. I will say, though, I love Garrett Oakley stepping into the Ben Sinnott role. Ben Urasek for Georgia. Like, look, I'm not sold on Oscar Delp. I've not taken Oscar Delp in any of these drafts. And the reason why is because Georgia is so supremely talented at every position. They would not take a transfer unless they felt like they needed one. So why would they take Ben Urasek into transfer at tight end if they felt like they were good with Oscar Delp? That's just a big question for me. So I'm not a big Oscar Delp guy. I'm a big Urasek guy, and I like that you can get him late in drafts. Brahmer of Iowa State, another guy that I would not have minded drafting. But when Mitchell Evans fell to me at the 175th pick, I really kind of could not pass that up. All right, so I was able to get Chris Tyree with my 16th round pick. Like I said, I like him a lot. The 16th round so far has been Roydell Williams, Ulysses Bentley, Nate Noel, Garrett Oakley, Peyton Thorne, and then Chris Tyree. Drake Dabney, and then Noah Whittington going after that. Noah Whittington is a guy I like a lot personally at where you can draft him at. When you look at how Oregon used their running backs last year, basically there was not really that big of a difference between Jordan James and Noah Whittington. But like heading into this year, everybody thinks there's going to be this massive gap between Jordan James and Noah Whittington. And with Whittington, you're drafting him so late that even though Oregon has that week 13 bye, you're not going to be super dependent on him, your 16th round pick, to advance to the finals. That, you know, maybe if you're able to make it there, he can be a key ingredient if he is able to have a big week 15. Or week 14, excuse me. So now it's about to come to me here in the 17th round. I've got 2 options queued up. I'm still sitting at 3 running backs, and they're 3 good ones. That's why I haven't taken another one. But I do want to get Donald Chaney of Louisville, Miami transfer. We have seen the Louisville offense feed running backs and really stick with one. Like last year, Jawar Jordan was an explosive playmaker in that offense. I'm hoping that Donald Chaney can come in, and with Penny Boone transferring out this spring, I think that Donald Chaney probably has that job locked up if Penny Boone felt the need to transfer out. So I'm really excited to take Donald Chaney there. I'm aware that Sam Brown by the ADP was probably the pick, but I do already have Cam Ward stacked up with Jacoby George. And Sam Brown, I felt like I needed a running back as opposed to Sam Brown. Sam Brown falls to me in the 18th round. That will be the pick. So right now I'm sitting at 4 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 7 wide receivers, 2 tight ends. So I have 3 more picks. I can be pretty flexible with where I want to go. I can really just kind of take my guys that I like that are left. I really like Niblack of Texas and Keanu Hill of BYU as late round tight ends. So we'll see if either of them fall to me. Sam Brown just went at the end of the 17th round. So there went that stacking option. Is there a tight end, or not a tight end? Is there a quarterback that I want to take near the end of the draft? Could take Alex Orji. Yeah. I think if he falls to me, I'm going to take Alex Orji with this next pick. And then I definitely need another running back before we end this draft, though. Okay. I've got a plan. So I am going to take Alex Orji here if he is able to fall to me. Then I'll go back over the guys that we're taking. But Alex Orji, you think about last year, J.J. McCarthy, what he was able to do at Michigan. It wasn't great from a fantasy perspective, but like it was respectable. Michigan's going to win a lot of games. And to me, with where Alex Orji's being drafted, it's like he's being drafted so late. It's like, do people think that Michigan's going to be bad? Or do they think that Alex Orji's going to get benched? I don't know. Alex Orji's a hyper mobile quarterback that is going to play for a team that's going to be winning a lot of games, going to have plenty of opportunities to score touchdowns. So even though he does have the dreaded week 12 bye, I've got 3 quarterbacks already that don't. So I feel pretty comfortable to take him as my 5th quarterback here near the end of the 18th round. All right, so let's get back to where the picks went. So Jamal Banks, Noah Thomas, Jalen Knighton, Pat Bryant, and Sam Brown ended the 17th round. Micah Bernard, Jaquez Moore, Rivaldo Fairweather, Rodney Hammond, Dylan Raiola. I took Alex Orji, Alex Bowman, and Sam Levitt, then went right after it, followed by Sam Roush, Rashad Amos, and Lawrence Arnold. And then Amari Niblack to end the 18th round. Dang, I really wanted Niblack. I really like Rashad Amos as well. Ole Miss having to replace Quinshon Judkins. There's a lot of options that they have in that backfield. And really, if you end up getting a guy that ends up being the option at this price tag, you're going to end up with a supreme bargain. So I would really like to take another running back before we end this draft. So what am I looking at that's left? Not a lot of great options. I should have known. So let's think here. I'm going to take DeMond Claiborne of Wake Forest. Wake Forest, we don't expect them to be very good, but Claiborne is clearly the incumbent running back coming in. This is a team that does play at a fast tempo. You're going to get a ton of plays. You're going to get a ton of run plays from them. So I do think that he is the option. And then to kind of make sure I have my bases covered at tight end and end up with 3 tight ends, I'm going to look to take Keanu Hill of BYU as my last tight end. I got to be honest, one thing that I kind of dropped the ball with, but I like the receivers that I got, but there's a ton of wide receivers at the end of drafts. One thing that I will die on is the quality of receivers that you can take at the end of the draft is much better than the quality of the running back, or certainly quality of the quarterback that you can get at the tight end position at the end of the drafts. Okay, so my guy, Keanu Hill, just went near the end of the 19th round after I picked Jace Brown, Cole Taylor, Joseph Manjack, Keanu Hill, Jimmy Horn, ended the 19th round, Antonio Williams starting the 20th round. So basically, Chris Mitchell is Notre Dame's wide receiver 1. He is still on the board. Dejon Stribling of Oklahoma State I like a lot as well. He's a guy that he was the number 1 wide receiver in that offense before he got hurt last year. And then Zachary Franklin is actually on Illinois now. Illinois had a target monster, Isaiah Williams, for them the last few seasons that is now gone. Somebody's going to have to take over that role and kind of take over a lot of targets. So with my tight end being gone, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take Zachary Franklin. With the last pick. I just barely got that in. Yeah. So I did only end up with 2 tight ends, but really I don't think any of the guys left are going to help me a whole lot. I do like Mark Redmond as a late round dart throw. I do like Arliss Boardingham and Thomas Fidoni as a late round dart throw, but I don't know, man. I would rather get that additional receiver and feel confident that my 2 tight ends in Haas and Evans at a one-off position are going to be good enough to get the job done. So that does it for my best Bowl Mania live draft. So we ended up with 5 quarterbacks, 5 running backs, 8 wide receivers, and 2 tight ends. I like that build. I like ending up with 5 quarterbacks and 5 running backs. Like I said, and kind of my strategy as we went through was where I go early is going to determine where I feel the need to catch up with later. And so looking at the quarterback position, I wasn't able to get any of the top tier quarterbacks, but I was able to replace it in the aggregate, right? Think about the movie Moneyball. We don't have to replace Jason Giambi's hitting 350 on base percentage, we can replace it in the aggregate, right? So I was able to get Daniels, Ward, Weigman, Sellers, and Orji, all 5 guys who give a ton of upside. Weigman and Sellers have some easy matchups in the playoffs. Orji and Ward do have the dreaded Week 12 bye, so I do have that to navigate. But Jalen Daniels at Kansas also an easy playoff schedule as well. Running back position, I got my 2 studs at the start, Hampton and Ott. I like that a lot, getting those 2 stud running backs to start. Even though I do find running back in general is the position that you can skip early and be okay with. It's kind of like a give and take, because I love the running backs you can get in the first 2 rounds. I really do. So I like that I got Hampton and Ott. Caleb Jackson is my 3rd running back. Don Chaney and Damon Claiborne, 2 guys that are going to be starters for their respective teams as my running back 4 and running back 5. I would rather do that than get like a handcuff near the end of the draft personally. And then at the wide receiver position, I just got guys, right? A lot of guys who are going to be the number 1 option on their offense. Isaiah Bond, Jaden Higgins, Denzel Boston, Jacoby George to stack with Cam Ward, CJ Daniels, LSU. I got 2 LSU guys in the squad now. Nick Harbor, South Carolina to stack with Stellars, Chris Tyree and Zachary Franklin, 2 late round dart throws that I love. And then at tight end, we got Luke Haas, who was really good last year in a limited role before he got hurt. Mitchell Evans, who was really good last year before he got hurt. So if one of those 2 guys can come back full strength, I'm feeling pretty good about this best Bowl Mania draft. All right, so that is going to do it for this episode. Y'all remember, if you do want more from me, find me on Patreon, patreon.com/MikesMoneyPicks. You can find my best ball rankings. They're going to be going up on there shortly. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the audio feed. That way you can be with us for the rest of college football season, because we are going to have some college football DFS content every single week for the rest of the regular season. So make sure that you are subscribed so you can be here for that. And we're also going to be doing some more best ball content as well. So make sure you're subscribed. That way you can be notified when all those episodes drop. And really, also, we got a ton of NFL best ball and NFL preseason content that's going to be coming your way as well. So just make sure you're subscribed for all that. But hopefully we gave you guys a really good picture here in this episode of the strategy and the thinking behind drafting, gave you guys a lot of good thoughts, a lot of players, a lot of names that you can look at for these drafts. So hope it was able to give you guys a ton of information. Remember, the rankings are available on the Patreon. Please hit the like button on the YouTube video before you go. Appreciate you guys watching and listening to this point. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time.